follow up to that, there will be a lot of back and forth individual typing the free text and suggestions that may come back. In other words, trying to help trying to help them be more specific in their question, or just sort of taking a phrase and running with it, having a little bit of back forth, do you mean such and such, to sort of help refine it, so that at least when
Yeah, exactly. So this fortunately is also a chat. So of course you can have multi-turn conversations, and if you notice something went wrong, you can correct. Also the model instruct it to, hey, take actually the exit time of the last day, not the entry time. But yeah, it also has the limitations of any other chatbot. The longer the chat becomes, the more likely the context will be forgotten somewhere. So yeah, but these are a little bit more common to the general area of LLMs rather than specific to M3.
So just to echo what Jalil said, this is amazing. Someone does research, some of our research fellows and residents are here as well. Truly helpful, empowering, and welcome the opportunity to work with you guys. Thank you for sharing this and coming here today. Question on a little bit of technical side. So you say you can do the free text based ask, essentially, whatever we want. Are there particular things which it is good at in certain types of analysis and certain things that it is unable to do or we should be using from a statistical standpoint?
I can also weigh in. Most of the time, the study designs are complex, and the LCP is going to help with that. And just to give you an example, we had a presentation yesterday from I believe he's the last author of the face age algorithm. And I'm mentioning this now because there was a lot of rich discussion that ensued. But the face age algorithm predicts your biological age based on your picture. And it says that if you look younger than your chronological age, then you have more physiological reserve. And perhaps you should be admitted to the ICU because you have a good fighting chance, no matter how sick you are. Perhaps you should be a candidate for chemotherapy, even though the side effects of the chemotherapy could kill you. And to us, the problem there is there's no ground truth. The ground truth that they're using is whether they survive or not if they were given chemotherapy. The problem there is there's so much bias on who gives chemotherapy. And I think their motivation is to show that doctors have a very poor ability to predict if someone is going to survive chemotherapy. So they got pictures of people, and they were supposed to predict whether they will survive chemotherapy or have a good outcome with an aggressive cancer. So yes, we agree that the baseline is very, very broken. And to me, this is the problem with AI, is that there's so much brokenness of the healthcare system that even a minor improvement would be very much embraced. So something like that will not be solved by the model context protocol. You need to be, and we're now discussing what is the best design for such a study when you don't have the ground truth for biological age. I was thinking it should be something that would reflect the ability of the cell to repair itself when there's a physiologic insult, or an organ to repair itself after an organ injury. So it can only do so much. And it requires you to be able to flesh out the study design. And typically, when I review a paper, it's not about problems with methodology, it's about problems with translating the question into a study design that is robust and solid. So to me, are there situations where you shouldn't be using this? I don't think so. But you have to be very careful that before you could go to the MCP, there has to be a lot of back and forth in terms of how you chose that particular methodology. Which brings up one or other initiative is how do you capture provenance? So we're now saying that this obsession with the p-value and effect size and the AUC, AUPRC, that's misguided. What you need to disseminate that will be useful to other people is the provenance, how you went from choosing the right question, pushing back on the question, looking at different methodologies that you looked at, also describing which methodologies did not work, because you don't see that in a scientific paper. It's only what worked. And there's a lot of learning that takes place. And we're working with some provenance computer scientists of how do you capture this. And I think M3 would be a good way of capturing the decisions made at every step of the research project. So again, that's a convoluted way of answering that. I don't see any limits of where you could use this. What I see the limit is the complexity of the question that you're trying to answer. Like early versus late initiation of some intervention. That sounds so simple, and people would use some machine learning methodology and like, wait, you are violating assumptions of positivity in all of your study design. So to me, what we're hoping is we're giving you these tools, but we're hoping that the time that you save to do a research project is time used well, time used to earn the earned understanding that we are talking about to offset the unearned knowledge that we get because of artificial intelligence.
Very helpful. Thank you. Completely agree that the methodology is very important. The selection process, not doing necessarily uh, going through that, but you know that once that has been selected and carefully, and collaboratively decided upon, then the tool can help executing that. And I think that's a super as well.
And I just wanted to say that so we were in Korea and there was a datathon where this competition, and the winning team created a package that will perform a target trial emulation, which is one of the hardest to do. Preparing the data set for a target emulation took us 1 year for our study when we were comparing is early versus late intubation during COVID. Is one better than the other? Anyway, spoiler alert, we found no difference between early and late. And if you could wait, of course, you should wait. Uh, but it took us 1 year to clean up the data, to make sure that we represent the state every hour up until the trial where they can be randomized, quote unquote, either be intubated or not intubated. Uh, but again, giving them a tool like an MCP, and they built it up, built their tool on top of KM3. So they were able to stand on giants of shoulders of giants. And that's what we want, is we want to be able to future-proof the provenance of the project because they can be repurposed for all sorts of future projects.
Yeah, thanks for the answer. I would just add that also one bonus kind of question, one bonus aspect where we noticed that was particularly helpful was also for like first-time users with working with these research questions. Of course, you can't make the mistake of just putting your research question and hoping, okay, the output is going to be 100% accurate, but just identifying the first few steps for research, as Leo said, to focus on the design, break it down. I think that would be sort of a highlight of where we've seen this work well. But of course, there's many more areas to explore. I'm not sure if someone's speaking, but we can't hear anything.
I was talking about some of the limitations in current memory protocol, and just again, where is the opportunity in future to overcome some of that, either through more local memory and how we can think about maybe personalizing once you have an established method to build on that prompt.
Sorry, could you repeat the question because it lagged a little bit for us? We couldn't hear it properly.
Sure. So I was asking about, we know there's limitations with current LLMs in terms of if you talk to them for a long time, they normally then end up kind of going in a circular error pattern. And so I just wonder, as we think about how do we potentially look to the future and overcome some of those challenges through ideally personalization, or again, just ability to have more localized memory to overcome that issue.
Yeah, I think this is definitely sort of limitation that we've noticed also working with these models. Like sort of the long context problem, which has been like there are a lot of initiatives trying to solve this problem, whether it be using mechanisms like flash attention in LLMs or space state models like Mamba, etc. I think this is definitely sort of an orthogonal path that will definitely help in these use cases. But it is definitely sort of a limitation in a lot of areas where LLMs are used, such as this one. But I think this would greatly improve what we're trying to do because, of course, we're depending on the context, we're depending on the tools.
I don't know how time-wise in terms if you want to move on to the next section or you're happy to do that. So just a huge thank you again. That was awesome. Thank you for sharing the demo. Let's take it again.
Yeah, thanks very much.
3 years.
Yes. Yes, so what we would like to do for the better part of this meeting of the souls and hearts really is to brainstorm on how do we attract clinicians and students and trainees to get involved in this movement, because this is truly a movement. This is not just a technical tool. This is a movement to change the way we think, the way we learn, the way we create knowledge. What carrots and what sticks can we come up with? One of the sticks that we are actively discussing with the Coalition of the Medical Specialty Societies, which is a consortium of all the professional societies, including AMA, AHA, AAP, is this idea of AI certification. But as soon as we said that, there was pushback already from the clinicians. Please don't give us another certification. But I said that, hey, we spend 6 hours every 2 years reviewing advanced cardiac life support and basic life support. And it's the same thing every 2 years. It's just test compressions. We do that because it's required. And we have a $1 million industry around BLS and ACLS training. Why not certification for a tool that is permeating the clinical workflow and it's changing its shape and function every time? Why not think about that? And it may not fly all across the board, but there are other ways of pushing that. You can tie in JCO certification for demonstration that their clinicians are up to speed with AI. You can tie that with medical education training, would provide funding if they bring in residents and fellows. Maybe that gets tied in there too. So we're all exploring possibilities. Maybe there would be some linkage with reimbursement from Medicare Medicaid people, that they have to demonstrate that they're providing some education to their clinicians before they get reimbursed by Medicare. And of course, if Medicare and Medicaid would push for this, you could rest assured that other insurance providers will also follow suit. But these are all sticks, and they will work. But what we want would be carrots. What will excite clinicians? What will get them out of the rut of their midlife crisis, wanting to quit clinical medicine? Is this something that might prevent it? I do have lots of friends who have sworn not to go back to clinical medicine, but now they're excited again. Maybe they could fix it this time. They would be not so worn out by the daily grind. So what we would like to do is to use the next half an hour for people just to allow their brains and their souls and their hearts to fart. So I'm not saying it, I mean, even if it's smelly, please say it, because sometimes it smells good for other people. So let's use this. And to me, this is the future. We need to have more space like this for reflection and reimagination. And reflection and reimagination will only work if you bring people who don't think like you. So what we want is to build resilience against echo chambers too. And there's a risk of developing an echo chamber here because the way we think is already congregated into a very similar spot. So please, from our group, as you can see, we have both clinicians and data scientists, and they are forced to work with each other. They are forced to talk to each other and understand what's happening. And I could tell you every day there's now 5 to 10 new papers about AI that everyone needs to hear. So again, traditional classrooms and courses and even online videos are not going to work. You need to be immersed in AI research to be able to keep up. So please.
I've got a question around. So you talked about the Korea project, and you were over there recently. And I just wondered, that balance between carrot and stick. Like, what was the success factors? Because you've been working with them for a while now.
So the stick there, or the carrot there, I believe it was a 10,000 US dollar prize to the winning team, and they did not go home during the event. And people are saying, why did they go home? Oh, well, because they all want 2,000 US dollars for not sleeping for one night. So that was a good carrot. And of course, we cannot afford that. But you feel the energy there too. People here have attended datathons, and everyone would describe it as almost like a life-changing experience. Suddenly their eyes are open. And that's what we want the clinicians, right? I'm now very careful about how I give my message, because some of them don't like it when we say that we are part of this very broken system. You cannot complain it because we're contributing to it. And they tune me out right away. Like, who are you to question my? So what we're trying to do is, can we have them remember the last time that they felt good about caring for a patient, and then recreate that with this type of experiences?
Going on one.
Do you want to introduce yourself
Yeah,
first?
I'm Mohammed Shaheen. I'm a master's in public health at BU, and I have bachelor's in computer science. I actually met Professor Leo back at Jordan, and it was the first datathon in the Middle East. And we had the same experience as, yet our carrot was a $25 coupon for a cake shop. So it's kind of hard. Honestly speaking, I believe it actually sparked the difference. It wasn't a major, let's say, change around the country, but it was in the Hussein Cancer Center, one of the top clinical centers in the Middle East. And the clinicians and professors who usually don't adapt with computers are still communicating with us, the technical team. And they are actually asking us regarding different different aspects, and they're not actually asking us to provide the code. They just asking us what we would recommend. They'll send us parts or segments. And I believe in the contest we worked on acute kidney injury, and they actually, after the data clone, they decided to continue in the paper. And I believe it was in April, and our paper got accepted, and it's going to be presented in March 2026 in Chicago. So they saw the potential, and they continued with it. And the thing regarding that tool, it breaks the, let us say, the fear learning, the technical part, let us say, and it's like driving a bicycle. First time you fall, it's a bit difficult. As soon as you get the swing of it, it will become a daily habit.
Amazing. Well, congrats on getting the paper. And I think another big part for us is just as we're thinking about the AI and having the conversation with the sandbox. It's also then next year in May, we're looking to have our own hackathon calling our Care AI-thon. So the AI being part of it, but the patient aspects, and actually, how do we get all the people in the room and learn from all the experiences you've had and where you've had successes, and how do we build on that, and how do we then, to your point, build that ground truth here in the local area. So I think that's kind of part of the hope. But we will have the next of these workshops on December 19th. And so we're running that earlier in the morning from 8 to 10, and then opening up the audience to external people. And really, when we open up the audience to the external people, that's us putting our marker down and saying, hey, we want to launch and announce in a 6-month runway to say that we're building towards May and starting building early. And so in terms of the office hours you mentioned, how do we use this capacity building exercise? What to use a success look like in 6 months? Because you spoke about at the beginning how things move and change so quickly. So again, how do we sort of stay agile, adapt towards that? Is it just purely by being able to get people into the room, or is there something else we need to think about?
Any other suggestions from the group? I'm sure you have some, and again, there will be no wrong suggestions there. Most of you have experienced the data font, and that's what we want to recreate. Yes, Ben.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I'm Bennett. I'm from Barcelona. I voluntarily had a hackathon. Like you said, experience as Mohammed right here. So I will. And mine is a question that just to understand the different. If you were to segment the different people in the hospital, for example, you said research fellows, you might have full-time like clinicians that have been 20 years at their post, people that are right coming out of med school. If you were to segment into like 3-4 groups, what would be the main character? If we all understand how the people, it's easier to try to think of specific carrots for each group rather than one for everyone, because everyone will have things.
I think that's a wonderful question and a segue to kind of truly granularly look into this subject, right? Because a carrot for someone is a stick for someone else.
Yes.
And that's what we see. I think for clinicians, even we are in healthcare, it's just starting there, and then we'll go, laterally and vertically. I think it's an action ability, right? So if I do not wear my researcher hat, it's about how can I make a difference, both for myself and for the patient at the point of care. So this asset and the analytics of that, how do we leverage that to building the knowledge that is providing me actionable insight and effects, make improve the quality of care, reduce the time in the hospital, whatever that is, right? And there are metrics. Any difference is a good. Even learning what not is a good thing to learn in medicine. And actually, a lot of time we spend is learning about what not to do, especially earlier in your career. You don't learn about how to catheter in your heart. You just learn not to take that decision in the middle of the night that, hey, this is I'm going to take the decision not to call my attending cardiologist, right? So what not to do is huge part of our training. So that's for clinicians, is making actionable insight. For researchers, research clinicians, research fellows, and data scientists, I think you have the carrots they need here by making it easy. I think the missing carrot here in my opinion, where we need to is translating it to clinical actionable insight at the point of care. How do we make that barrier go even further lower to make it happen? For administration, there are different candidates, right? Where they are looking at length of stay, how quickly we can discharge people on the day of discharge. 9 a.m. versus 11 a.m. makes a huge difference in the ER backup. Are we meeting the quality metrics of having hemoglobin A1C checked once a year, or mammogram, whatever the colonoscopy, whatever the recommended quality metrics are we meeting those checks, right? So kind of having that kind of insight. And so I wonder if there is a possibility for this model to have different phases based on what you can integrate, right? So you can build a dashboard for C-suite where they are not that they don't care for patients, but they also have a larger picture to look at for a clinician and for researcher and data scientist.
Yeah, I think regarding the actionability, what these models can provide is they speed up the process from that random question that pops in your head as a clinician.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I would like to see if actually between this intervention, the ICU is yielding some benefit.
Yeah.
And this, of course, requires a massive research question and everything. But sometimes I think these projects get stuck at the beginning where you have these questions, you try, okay, let's see what has happened in the past 10 years, what data we have. And you try to find the data scientists, they are very busy and it just dies. No. So these can help with this exploration phase and get you to work more in tandem with the data scientists and actually see, okay, this is a research question that we have data we can pursue. So by speeding up this beginning process, we can get actually closer to the actionability at the end, right? It's making this beginning the exploration, you know which direction to walk.
Yeah.
You get a clear compass, and this can be the act. It's this. And make it easier for people that don't have the technical.
So I'm going to actually volunteer Henry, sorry, Henry, for putting the spotlight on you. He's our, wonderful, excellent data scientist. We rely heavily on him, volunteer with all sorts of questions. Henry, what would you like us to do with this before we come and bother you as a preliminary step to make it easy for you? Or we can at least use it as a triage where we know what's not going to work, what's going to work, or whatever. How do you see this?
I mean, this is really nice. Apologies, I came late. But from what you showed, we saw you querying and very minute data set using very important. Which is amazing. So I think that can solve the show discovery process for the clinician. Is that interrogating the data just to understand what's going on in plain English language, from quantitative complex theories. That feed into what's possible and what's not usable in data areas of what can be mean when the study field cluster. He mentioned that the accuracy of the query is around 90%. May not be good enough.
No. Those benchmarks. So I keep saying those benchmarks created by machine learning needs to be let go of because they don't mean anything. The only way you can evaluate this is for continuous use.
Yes. And it's a complex database. What we deal with is way more complex. Clarity database has 20,000 tables, internal data. I think one of the largest tables is like 60 billion. The flush table. Leveraging AI for information front end to interrogate and know what's going on, what's possible to do in studying. Again, it's more of a discovery process. And that's where it's to focus. For me as a data scientist, physician by training, data scientist, I'm looking for power out of this by plugging clarity into it. And really do the kind of analysis that will take me days to go. Don't know about vegetable that I don't know about. And harvest the holy grail right now is or not. We don't currently have the ability to harvest rice component. We used to have traditional NLP, natural language processing, but I think this has power to young person. Once the data is, it will soon go try to answer query come from to you. That's where it's the protection of what has happened.
Now, it's very good. So what do you think of kind of clarity? Uh, is that visibility in sense?
I mean, we need to integrate with the different data sets out there. Our fear about Cosmos AI and Epic is that there is a bottleneck. Like you're at the mercy of the people who could query the data set. With Mimic, there was no bottleneck. We opened it, and that's why it produced 10,000 papers. And I mean, granted that some of them are not robust. I mean, I cannot also guarantee robustness of what we're doing now because there's very few people like looking at the data set. And to us, again, data curation has to be done by the community. There's no way that a small group or even a large group can understand it. And again, they have to stand on each other's shoulder. They need to share their codes. They need to share their provenance of how they arise a certain methodology. Otherwise, it's all wasted energy. It's so inefficient. We're putting in all this time, it's opportunity costs. We could be doing something else. And yet, I mean, we could fill in our time with all these tasks that in the end are not reusable and repurposable. So there's a lot of discussion now about what this provenance look like. What does reproducibility look like in the age of AI, or even in the clinical research? We wrote this paper, The Myth of Reproducibility, because your effect size, your p-value, they're all tied to the conditions of the experiment. They're all tied to the clinical practice that was happening when you observed, when you collected the data. So don't focus on that. Focus on the decision making. And that's what we think reproducibility and replicability should mean now. It's not being able to repeat the experiment. You can never repeat an experiment. You're in a different point in time. So this is the discussion we want everyone. And it comes up naturally as soon as you bring people like this together. It's just, again, it's so easy to teach critical thinking. All you have to do is bring groups like this, and magically it conjures in front of your eyes. But it's very hard because the legacy systems force you to work in silos.
I wonder from the data farms, like, is it always looking for new insight versus there's maybe some easier wins? Like, again, part of this discussion was thinking about the pain points. And I think since the beginning around the admin burnout. And so wherever you could try to automate process, to me, that's maybe some of the lower lying fruits. And so is that something you've seen from the datathons where we can start to do that as an outcome? And maybe that's something that's more tangible in the short term.
So to me, the best value of the datathon is the relationships that forge during the event. A lot of the people that we work with and we've grown because they never leave. Like the professors now, and they're still involved. They're working for Google, they're working for Takeda, and they come back. They teach students because they know that they learn from the students too. So to me, I always say, don't focus on the what, focus on the who and the how. The who and the how become the new what. That's what you need to study. And I think that's an easy win. I mean, again, we experienced every data talk. You see the chips grow, you see the posts on social media. Everyone is truly sort of reborn when they attend. And that's what we're hoping to recreate with tools like this, which are going to make it so much easier for us to talk to each other.
So I maybe can comment a little bit on what's changed. I graduated med school before some people were born. I started working life in '99. Back then, I worked in England at environmental in the US, and I surgery and radiology. So I've had kind of a broad experience. You know, the point that Leo made earlier is really fundamentally accurate. With the concept of an expert and the fact that you would go to an attorney and you go to the lawyer's office, and typically on the bookshelf behind them, they have these volumes of case law. to amplify the fact that they are the expert. The reality is their knowledge base is constrained to the areas that they have expertise in. They don't actually know all of that case law. But if a system knows all of the cases that have ever been tried, what the outcomes were, what's the purpose of the lawyer? Why am I going to this individual when the system could actually reference and provide me an argument that actually is probably more accurate, more fundamental based? Same is true of being a doctor. Back in the day, no one would question what a physician would tell them. Go in, you assume a kind of almost like a childlike persona, even though you might be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, because you're ill and you're speaking to your uncle and saying, I'm ill, what can you do to help me? And the doctor, in their kind of gravitas and in their way, would make decisions and determinations and say, based on available information, this is the condition you have, protocol I will treat you on. And you go in good faith. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, maybe they missed something, who knows? But we're at a point where all of these data points are actually relevant. And there are other aspects which are never considered in medical training. So the medical school that I entered, and I become part of the Church of Medicine, right? And I become a kind of a high-level individual within that church. You come to me and I will give you the doctrine of medicine. Maybe my doctrine is flawed. Maybe the methodologies from the time that I understood them and was taught are inaccurate, incomplete. That's obvious. I mean, it's obvious that as a maturing society, we're constantly learning. So this is tremendously exciting because it gives us an opportunity to reflect back on ideas and thoughts that we maybe never considered and which should become a part of our day-to-day life. And it's important to consider the rubrics at the door. Absolutely. Enter the space humbly. Don't think that because you have whatever titles and qualifications that you're necessarily an expert, you have some domain expertise, but there are others that will come into the space with another form of domain expertise, and it's that collaborative effort. So fundamentally, what has changed? Well, the number of patients that we manage has increased dramatically. All of our hospitals, every single clinical environment is saturated. People have aged successfully, beating one cancer, maybe two cancers. Now maybe you have a recurrence of one or two cancer, and then whatever else is going on. So the aging population, multiple complexities that come, is the reality of modern medicine in the US. And trying to manage that is incredibly arduous. The documentation goes with that, need for the clinicians to be identifying all of these various data points is incredibly arduous. The need to sit and review consultant specialist notes. There were generalists back in the day. One person would take care of everything. Now there are all of these different subspecialties, each of which has its own subspecialty areas. So trying to now tease through this, if I'm running a hospitalist service with 50 or 60 patients who are on my list, trying to understand which specialist to contact, which recommendation to follow, how to prioritize that is incredibly arduous. These are the sort of day-to-day challenges. So these are the people that are saying, I'm saturated, I cannot do any more. Don't ask me to do something else. So to Saju's point, what is actionable? Well, if I'm seeing someone in clinic, or even in radiology, if I'm looking at an image on the screen, what do I need to know? I need a one paragraph synopsis of why the patient got this imaging study. What should I be focused on? Yes, they may have 4 or 5 different conditions. What was the thing that brought them to the clinic that had them have the CT or MR in the first place? Right now, I have to trawl through Epic to find that. This takes me at least 5 minutes. Some of my colleagues will not do this because it takes us 5 minutes. And if you do that for every single case, you're going to be spending an hour or two during the day just looking through the EHR, but information which should be immediately available and kind of curated to that patient. So that would make a huge difference to me. It would improve the quality of my report because to know this patient had an adrenal lesion 10 years ago and the same lesion is there today, I don't need to do anything about it. I don't need to start equivocating and saying this is indeterminate, this could represent a metastatic lesion. It's nonsense. The patient doesn't need any further follow-up. Just leave it alone. So these are just fundamental things. And again, you see a patient in clinic, is that one paragraph synopsis that could be brought to their attention? And what is it that has fundamentally changed from one visit to the other? And then another piece of this, which I think is really helpful, is the idea of the patient at the center of their care, really to empower patients to not be the 5-year-old coming to their uncle, but you're you should take ownership of your health. You need things to help you, you need things to guide you. But the access to the patient portal is great, but it's not super helpful either, because now you have people looking through the clinic notes, looking at this medical verbiage, which is really confusing and actually makes them more and more confused. But how do we translate that? How do we allow patients to become a little bit more in charge of their healthcare so that they can become their own advocates into the clinical environment? So it's all about just, all of this sea of data that we're swimming in. How do we make it in such a way that can crystallize at the right time for that patient, that clinician, to make good decisions? And then ultimately for the research piece, how do we redefine what medicine looks like? Medicine in this era will be fundamentally different to anything we've ever seen before. I think we just need to start from that premise. We're not throwing out a baby with the bathwater concept, but it will look fundamentally different, and the tools we have at our disposal are fundamentally different. And lessons we learn here can actually be applicable to other parts of the world, which is incredibly exciting. The notion of bringing joy back in for a provider. So why did I enter this? Why at the age of 7 or 8, when I said I want to be a doctor, what was it that was driving me in that direction? What is at the age of over 50 that says I still want to be a doctor? Well, I think some of it is that notion of service to others, the sense of someone is coming to me, they are not well. I have a skill set that can be brought to bear to support them. Guess what? The modern day doctor isn't just that. The modern day doctor is the data scientist, is the research assistant, is the person with the innovative idea who can think about how to use that data differently. It's an amalgamation. Maybe my role is also in environment. Maybe my role is to talk about dietary issues, environmental concerns. That's all part of health, wellness. So anyway, these become much bigger ideals, but just to focus our attention on what the here and now is, it's about this kind of empower the patients, help them understand where they are, their healthcare journey, help them understand what tests, investigations are beneficial to them, resource management for the clinician, for the administrators in the hospital, and help us know how to make those interactions as meaningful as possible.
Okay, well, actually, I'm sure it was transformed. I'm around, I'm from Korea, transform surgery. And one of the carrots as like those actionable queries could also be like finding the patient that look like that has the same features of patients that you're caring right now. So for example, if there is a transplant surgeon who came into the ER and had this ground glass capacity of CT or lung CT, then we would actually want to know before the cultural results whether there were patients like this before in our database. And that is very important in planning the treatment. So at that point, I would actually, if we didn't have these access, or if we didn't have this access to the tools, LLM-based tools, which can navigate through the data, I would just go to my seniors and, have you seen any patient like this? Just ask them. However, that's very limited to their experience. So looking back at the immense data we have, if we have a tool to navigate through those data, we would actually be able to get patient cohort very specialized, very personalized, very like based on journey or based on the current status or the phenotype. We could get information from that cohort and actually see how they progress, what diagnosis they had at the end, and how they like if they were discharged, if they would potentially die. So, and then we would base our very personalized treatment plans based on. So I think that's a very powerful thing that these tools can bring.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Boya. I'm a PhD student from my Physiology Institute, and I want to follow up the discussion that just said. So, as a computer scientist, as an engineer, in my point of view, when I look at the problem, finding the student patient, I encode
patient into a vector base, and then I try to compare the severity between the numbers, and I try to output the similar patient that I find missing. So in the field of our study, we have input and output, we have systems, and we always try to maximize the potential of that system to predict better output. But then, as you said, the benchmark we have, it's tailored for us. It's not tailored for the application in medicine. So what we would like to have is actually what the doctors want to what is your need, what can help in the application to help you better treat patients, to help everyone have better qualities. But when I begin my study, I realized that so the questions that we're asking is actually true. What do you need? What do you need from us? Not what do we need to pose to doctors? That's one of the reflections I have.
That's a great point. A couple of technical questions. Can we bring our own data set to this?
Yes. So as I said, there are efforts around the world where they are creating. So we're hoping to have a 3D printer for model context protocol. So they're all discussing what is the recipe, what are the ingredients, so that you don't have. And Raina, you can answer the question too about how do we create this for different data sets.
So for the M3, where we were leveraging the model context protocol, we of course started with the mimic data set first. Sorry, I hear an echo of myself. Okay. Sorry. So can you hear me? Okay. You muted yourself. Okay. So yeah, we started first with the mimic dataset, but then we extended also to the whole PhysioNet platform. So our next goal would be to have a PhysioNet MCP. So just a chatbot interface where you're leveraging LLMs, and then you can select what data set you're using within the PhysioNet platform. But of course, at the moment, we're only looking at tabular data, so electronic health records. Then later on, we also want to integrate models that are better at multi-modal, so computer vision and also images and so on. But at the moment, we're only looking at tabular data. And also for K-Mimic, for example, we already managed to create a KM3, we called it. So the K-Mimic Korean version of Mimic using MCP, which also has the same structure. They just had some small differences in how they were hosting the data set. So they weren't using the BigQuery, they were using just PostgreSQL. And I think that's quite easy to do because as long as we have the same structure, but also if the table names are not the same or the row names are not the same, I believe that with MCP and tool calling and just using a model that is computationally effective, but also has some reasoning, then it would make it's not an easy task to do. So in case you have some other data sets in mind, then we're also happy to collaborate and see how we can leverage the MCP project with other data sets. I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
No, I think that was very helpful. So if we have a multi-modal data, let's say I use either our own Epic data hospital or Epic Cosmos data with some other data, and I'm just going to example based on on environmental data, let's say from EPA, and this model M3, and doing that multi-model if we were to be able to give the data set in some structured fashion.
Yes, so I think I was just gonna say, definitely the vision is for this to be able to handle images and waveforms. So we have a lot of people here who are working with multimodalities. The issue, of course, is compute resource. So how many icebergs do we melt when we ask one question?
How about just the text tabulated data? Even the multimodal, like, let me rephrase, multi-source data.
Yes, so we do have like Mimic 4 has notes.
Yeah.
So one of the projects is looking at sentiment analysis. Can you even detect the sentiment of the doctor, or the nurse, or the social worker? So definitely that is not too difficult to add. We started off with tabular data because that's the lowest hanging fruit. But Mimic 4 has echocardiograms, and there are people here who have been working with how many tens or even hundreds of thousands of videos. But we're just afraid, again, we're very mindful of the environmental impact, because even if you treat the patient, if you kill the planet, then it's all worthless. So there's a lot of work here on vector embeddings. Can we represent all this computationally expensive data as numbers, as vectors? The problem there, and this is something that I would like to discuss further, is how does a multimodal model prioritize which vectors to use first? Are they going to use the vectors from the text, the vectors from the images, the vectors from the waveforms? And can you direct them to prioritize the ones that are giving more information? What happens if the vectors from the text are saying different from the vectors from the waveforms? And I'd like to write an R01 proposal, Takeshi, on that topic. And I think we should meet tomorrow, flesh out what are the specific aims of that kind of a project. But I think that the goal is to be able to use this for every type of data that we're swimming in, but being mindful of how do we move forward. And this is why we also advocate for philosophers and social scientists to be part of the group. And I think you could probably tell that I talk to philosophers every day now, because we need to understand what is it that we want to do. If you give them less pajama time, are you not just giving them more patients to see during the daytime? Because somehow you need to address the corporatization of healthcare. So trying to fix this without fixing the world is not going to work. I keep saying that a system that cannot be fixed without us AI is a system that will not be fixed by AI. And we learned that very, very early on. And that's why we do not want to be activists, but we need to be activists. We want to succeed with this technology.
Many of us are going to steal that with you credit and use it. And I think, thank you.
Yes, Luis, introduce yourself and then.
Hi, my name is Luis. I'm in Mexico. I'm doing the right now. I'm doing biomedical engineering. And I'm an undergrad. And well, one of the points that I want to point is that the outcome, the define of the outcome is crucial. Like it's as a mirror. So if you don't define the output that you want to see, you will see chaos. So you need to define what's a health person, what's a health case. In case of the example we was seeing yesterday, that we can measure the face and see how ages came. So we must define which is a healthy face in this case. That's crucial. And in the other point, maybe we must refocus in what's the problem. In the case of patient, maybe we don't need very complex AI systems, just a microphone for the channel. He says everything he needs, and the AI is writing all that down and making correlation. Maybe it's that improvement that making a biggest improvement, like, wow, this is a novelty, because now we can assure that this person will be sick before that she even know that he is sick. That's not necessary. So 2 points, we must define a healthy outcome to compare between input and output, and we must simplify the problem and see what's the problem in the whole.
When you speak up so that we can record this.
So I have another comment about what you just raised. So maybe before, if I know if no problem, I go to a lawyer. I go to a doctor. But now I can just ask ChatGPT about my concerns. But what I find in my experience, so I asked some law issue to the ChatGPT, and then I asked my lawyer friend, what do you think of it? And she said, it's not so precise. It's okay, but still, it's from my perspective, it's not going to. If I'm going to write it, not going to write this. And then I spoke with my doctor friend about my health issue. So I asked ChatGPT also, and then I asked her like, if it would be your answer, how will you answer this question? And then she's like, I'm going to answer it like this way, but then it's also diverge from what ChatGPT has generated for me. So one of the things that are very interesting is how can we prompt these language models that are trained for the doctor's expertise. So to mimic a real doctor, like not just chat as a friend and with Dr. Long. That's possible help reflections.
I had one feedback for that, which is, you're making a very good point, but I would also say in their defense, they're babies, they're like 3 years old or younger. So I would anticipate that in a very short space of time, we will see much more mature responses as they adapt and understand where the limitations were. The other piece, which is a more existential question, which is the paradigm of medicine and law correct? So you will have your colleagues in medicine and law say, I would do this differently. And you would trust them because, hey, they've spent 20 years or whatever studying and practicing. But is their methodology, in fact, a pure methodology? And that's a bigger question, because then it speaks to the training that people have had and the experience that they've had. And maybe the entire system is ultimately inaccurate because we've always just built things on human-based foundations and maybe not always as objective as it needs to be. And even in legal cases, these are arguments that people make, that someone presides over the argument, and then at a certain point makes a determination, yes to this, no to that. And then that forms kind of a pillar and a foundation for the next set of laws and rules that follow. Similarly, we've made certain assumptions about the body, but having spent a little bit of time doing basic science research and immune-mediated complications, it's so difficult to be able to gain accuracy in that domain because there are so many different chemical pathways, and you end up sort of focusing on one small area, one pathway, but really without the perspective of what are the negative, positive feedback loops, what else is going on in the body. So even though I might think that I've solved something at one point, I'm not really understanding the entire system. And that's, I think, the true excitement of where we're at now is the more data you can throw, the more you can perhaps understand other things that were never understood. Even some of the modern day medications that we prescribe to patients, which have gone through phase 3 trials and are just accepted as a standard, turns out that the mechanism of action is not what we thought. Even though the outcome is what we needed, the mechanism of action of these drugs is not, in fact, what we had assumed. And it's a side effect of that drug, which is treating the condition. So these are fascinating insights that only now, decades later, wow, the last 30 years we prescribed this, thinking we were, clean. So anyway, all this to say that I think we have to raise the question our current paradigm, including the things that seem the most legitimate. Such and such universities are so prestigious, gotten such degrees. So it's fascinating. I think it's again the door concept. So let's be open-minded, but recognize that these systems, I think, are
I just add to that, usually say is, all these billions of data points we have, the two most important things that's going to define any patients, regardless of the condition they have, their outcome, or, large majority of the time. Pick any two things. Age. Okay, age. The other thoughts? Comorbidities. It's comorbidity. Getting there. Something called eyeball test, and that no model is able to capture that, right? When a physician, healthcare worker walks into patients home and that eyeball test, and we don't know. Your own version of AI network gut feeling, whatever you call it, right? And probably that gut feeling is the right terminology because gut has more neurons than brain and spine combined. So that is one thing. Second thing is someone at the bedside, any relative, kind of going to that socioeconomic status, kind of what's the societal support or family support kudos, these two things have outperformed any other thing, lactate and CRP and troponin and whatever other things we want to dive into. Of course, not talking about patient in cardiogenic shock with blood pressure of 0. Yes, that's what it matters. But if you take the routine incomers to emergency department, someone else at bedside, and the eyeball test, this two will outperform any other objective evidence. And that's really hard for any model to capture. And I think that's where probably what you say about your lawyer friend or your physician friend comes into play. And at least for medicine, I can say it is as much of an art as it is a science. And I hope this model and many other models to come are going to enable us to do more things as human that we are supposed to be doing, spending more time with patients, right? It's not to replace that judgment, because at the end of the day, it's a judgment call. And the AI model is also learning based upon the same text that is correct and incorrect from last century or before. And so I think it is also going to present those black and white sides of make that judgment in the gray zone. And I think that's where probably your friends are coming in slightly different angle, if not the different information about this. And I think it persists, and actually we enhance that using this thing so we can spend more time at this.
I also would like to follow up the data topics. I'm Francesca. I'm a biomedical engineer and a PhD student. And I had the opportunity to be a mentor in the Datathlon in Milan in the Google office. And then my team was composed by physicians. And the oldest one was 75, I suppose. And from computer science, the youngest was 19 years old. It was really interesting and amazing seeing them interacting on each other, because they also were really engaged about by the observation that they came from the different side, even if all the 4 physicians involved in that specific team came from a really different faculties. And also they, as my colleagues told before, they kept engaging, and they still write me how that project would be proceeded. They would like to be engaged and be part of the process. And also another thing that I would like to add about what you would like to have in your experience, I think that is one of the most engaging and like things that I thought when I started to study electrical engineering, because I really want to integrate also technology in been, but since we spent years to study technology itself, maybe we have not the vision about what is really needed and what can help with this type of application models, study, research, brainstorming, really engage and people that would really help and impactful improving the patient life.
Want to wrap it up?
Yeah, I just want to say huge thank you. Huge thank you again to everyone online for the amazing demo. I mean, again, the opportunity is huge. Really excited for the next steps again for us building after. I think, you know, just a huge thank you to being here today. This is the start of the journey. You've been a little bit ahead of us, I think, in terms of what you've done. But I think looking forward to next year and the opportunity for this Datathon, this Hackathon, this Careathon in May, it's about how do we take that next step. So December 19th, when we do the next workshop, we'll share a very brief survey, literally 3 questions. One of them is your name. And literally, it'll be, what did you like about today? What can we do better? And I think when we do, what can we do better? It's like, well, who else do we have in the room? To Leo's point around, how do we start to think about the business model? Where do we get the money and start to think about how we build capacity and resources? Again, and we're happy to take this on. We're very fortunate again to have a philanthropic supporter who's very keen to see AI have this impact, this more tangible output. And I think it always comes back to, again, like what pain point can we solve that creates a near-term outcome? So I think it's great that we can keep on diving into the research, but again, it's the more we can create near-term impact, whether that's in Julio's 5 minutes, or whether that's, you know, getting something more ambitious to the ability to have the eye tracking where you have the eyeball tests. I think that's the bigger picture stuff, but I think again that 5 minutes adds up a lot. And so if you're doing that through a number of processes, then there's maybe something there. So I think again, this next stage where we start to hone in on those pain points is really going to be something we're going to be focused on. So more to follow. We'll obviously do a debrief. We'll do a summary of today's session, and then we'll be setting up maybe interim discussions where we can come together and we can put minds think again, like how do we do this better? And again, December 19th will fall into 2 parts. So we'll have our workshop in the morning from 8 to 10 o'clock, but then we're opening the doors to everyone else. And we're really inviting the ecosystem. So last time when we launched the hub at the end of June, we had more than 150 people in the main auditorium next door. So how again do we use that as a shop window to go as we start to build towards this bigger opportunity, this event in May? Like, who do you want in that room? Who do you want to be in this thing? We'll be inviting state partners who have funding. We'll be inviting innovators who have ideas. We'll be inviting other technical experts. So again, just want to leave that with you to think about. We're here to help you on this journey, and we can only do it together. So again, just huge thank you to everyone. Huge thank you to Leo for coordinating. Thank you.
For yes. So everyone, please.